reason to open an investigation on them. Mattingly's attorney reminds the community that Mattingly was shot and severely wounded the night Breonna Taylor was killed, and that Mattingly is hopeful this process moves forward quickly and his fellow officers and the people of Louisville remain safe.
It is exhausting to be on pins and needles.
And as another sun sets on Louisville, Reynolds waits with the rest of the community for a decision from the Attorney General. Heather Fontaine for the Night Team.
Well, Doug, traffic has been slow coming in and out of downtown all day, and you can see why behind me. These barricades here have been keeping people in and keeping cars out of the downtown area. LMPD says this isn't a lockdown, rather it's a precaution as the city waits for an announcement from the Attorney General's office.
We don't know exactly what the outcome will be. We don't actually know when they're going to make their decision, but in the meantime, it's difficult for us. We're going to have to adjust.
Leon Payne's commute downtown Tuesday morning was a little different.
That was me, frustrating. I got here knowing that I thought I was going to come in and I had to be like everybody else, follow different routes.
What he and other drivers saw, roads blocked off by concrete barriers, police cruisers, and dump trucks set up by Louisville Metro Police in anticipation of a decision from Attorney General Daniel Cameron in the Breonna Taylor case.
I understand that this has caused inconvenience for many of the public, and we just ask that people bear with us as we go through these unprecedented times.
Interim Police Chief Robert Schroeder says barricades have been set up around Jefferson Square Park, which has been the center of protests over the last several months, and around the perimeter of downtown Louisville. While these barricades are meant to restrict vehicles from coming in, Schroeder says foot traffic will not be restricted.
People can still access that on foot. They can drive down, park where they need to park, and walk on in and express their First Amendment concerns freely and peacefully.
Police have also restricted on-street parking in the downtown area and will be limiting access to parking garages. Schroeder says officers will work with people living, working, or have business downtown, and says this is not a lockdown, even if it feels like it to those downtown.
That is certainly not our intention. Our intention is merely to ensure public safety, to help protect people, help protect businesses, and help prevent property damage.
Here new on the Night Team tonight, a woman is preparing to sue the police department after being arrested for waving a handgun at a man in a car during a Friday protest in eastern Jefferson County. She says the man pointed his gun at her first, and tonight we've confirmed that man has also been fired from his job here in Louisville, even though he doesn't face charges. The Night Team's Heather Fontaine has the new information.
The woman caught on police cameras waving a handgun Friday afternoon on Hurstbourne says her attorney plans to sue the Louisville Metro Police Department.
I wasn't even thinking about my life in that moment. I was thinking about everyone else that was around, which is why I drew my weapon back.
Robin Ash argues the video shared on LMPD's Facebook page is not the whole truth and says the person inside this vehicle showed their gun first.
His gun was pointed at, directly at me. It was like I walked up and his gun was just specifically for me, is the way I felt in that moment.
Police described individuals as surrounding and inflicting damage on a vehicle during protests in the area, then say Ash pointed a handgun at the man inside of it, placing him and others in extreme danger. This video was taken on a cell phone by someone just feet away. You can see the driver pointing a gun from behind his window. Later, he gets out of the car, gun in hand, and checks out the damage.
They have lied.
Ash's attorney, David Maurer, says he's going to sue the officers involved in the case.
For malicious prosecution of this lady, I'm going to sue for slander and for defamation.
When WHAS 11 News asked police about the driver, Sergeant Lamont Washington said he will not be arrested because he was the victim in the incident. But that didn't stop his employer from firing him. A statement from American Air Filter says they support the right to peacefully assemble. And in our view, the actions of this individual show poor judgment and are inconsistent with the core values of our company.
I just wasn't wildly pulling my gun around children.
Ash was charged with wanton endangerment, criminal mischief, and for being a convicted felon in possession of a handgun. She argues she was pardoned by the governor in 2015 and that her civil rights were restored. Maurer says he will fight to get her charges dismissed. Heather Fontaine for the Night Team.
With the restrictions downtown in anticipation of the announcement from the Attorney General, many businesses are boarding up now or closing down. Tonight, Gabrielle spent the day talking with business owners, and she's continuing our live team coverage here tonight at 6. Tonight, what'd they tell you?
Well, Doug, for months, most of these buildings were boarded up, but today almost all businesses in downtown on 4th Street are closed. There was a crew that just wrapped up here in front of Mi Casita on 4th. They were here for much of the day with power tools, covering windows with plywood panels. They, like others, are preparing for whatever the decision may be, well, whatever the reaction may be once the Breonna Taylor decision is announced.
Storefronts boarded up. Almost every door closed. For months, plywood panels have replaced the bright lights and bustling activity that used to decorate 4th Street live.
I'm not sure how to feel. There are a bevy of emotions happening right now. You know, there's pain, there's sorrow, there's frustration, there's compassion and empathy. There's so many things, so many people that are hurting on every spectrum. So, you know, I'm one of those people.
Gwendolyn Brashear is the co-owner of Jumping the Broom Bridal Studios, where she sells wedding gowns.
Let me see what I have. Okay, yeah, no. We're so ready. We are ready to start business.
She was supposed to have a grand opening in March until COVID-19 shut everything down. Little did she know protests would be the next challenge.
We're hopeful that we'll still be able to open in October. We'll just have to wait and see.
Fashion Club, a women and children's clothing store, is welcoming customers.
A lot of people come and still worry about us, and then they just want to find out what's going on.
Despite past events where looters targeted businesses, the owner, Young Kim, is keeping her spirits up.
I just prayed every night, my 4th Street, not for only my store.
Brashear is taking her designer wedding gowns with her, but for now, she's using her empty store to show solidarity.
So we just wanted to pay honor and tribute to her. We support you, and we want this to be something that we can come together and work through for the good of all people. All right.
No stopping anytime signs have been placed throughout the area immediately surrounding Jefferson Square, and for now, it's quiet. Live on 4th Street, Senai Gabriel, WHAS 11 News.
New tonight here on the Night Team, a Louisville pastor who has been marching with the protesters since the beginning has come up with a way to continue protesting with all the new barricades. Pastor Tim Finley Jr. is offering demonstrators parking at his church, the Kingdom Fellowship Life Center on East Broadway, and a shuttle back and forth to Jefferson Square Park this week. Finley says some protesters say their cars have been towed while they were protesting downtown, so he thought to give them a place to park.
Here on private property, I'm exercising my right to allow protesters to park here, and then shuttles will be taking them to and from where they need to go.
Our city, Louisville, is ready and waiting tonight, but anxious and very concerned about the final decision from Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron in the Breonna Taylor shooting. As the Night Team's Tyler Emery shows us, all signs around downtown tonight appear to point that announcement on any charges for the 3 officers is imminent.
Boards newly nailed to windows, fencing up around downtown buildings as the city and the federal government make preparations for an announcement.
Everybody is on pins and needles. It's very stressful.
LMPD announcing a state of emergency for the police department, which means canceling all off days and vacation requests for officers effective immediately and until further notice. To department also saying the public will see even more boarding going up, as several federal buildings like the Missouri federal office boarding up today, with federal authorities protecting them.
We believe it seems to be an overreaction, but maybe they have information that we don't have.
No one wants to presume that there's going to be violence.
Tonight, the president of the Downtown Business Association sent an email to business owners urging them to start taking some steps, like removing these tables or any other objects from the exterior of buildings, also like these plant structures outside of another restaurant here at 4th Street Live. She also is encouraging employees to begin working remotely.
Making certain that LMPD has the support that they need, you know, that there are not folks in the way, and that they can really focus.
Public Works putting no parking anytime signs on nearly every meter downtown as Jefferson Square protesters make their own preparations.
We're wearing wristbands and we're holding people accountable. We're all just worried about everybody being safe. We just need people to be safe, or all of this was for nothing.
The federal courthouse downtown is already closed this week as a decision in the case looms.
I don't think anybody knows, and I think everyone is preparing for the worst, and I think emotionally we should try to prepare for that, but I'm optimistic about justice.
LMPD says tonight it doesn't know when an announcement is coming from the Attorney General's office, and we checked with Daniel Cameron's team tonight, who tells us they have no timetable to release. For the Night Team, I'm Tyler Emery.
Eyes are on Louisville today as we wait for the final decision in the Breonna Taylor case. The big question, will the police officers involved in her death face charges? And now the Louisville Metro Police Chief has declared a state of emergency for the department as it prepares to hear that answer. We have Brooke here this morning. Brooke, we are seeing more barricades going up downtown.
Yeah, and if you've been downtown in recent weeks, if not months, you've seen that most of the buildings recently have already been boarded up. But today you'll find even new fencing up along the same areas of downtown and no parking signs on a majority of the meters. Now, LMPD also canceled all of the off days and vacation requests for officers effective immediately, and that goes until further notice. The department says it does not have information about when a decision is coming, but the orders are to ensure there is enough staffing. And just a couple hours ago, LMPD released even more details of its plan, including barricades around Jefferson Square Park and the downtown perimeter. There are some of the ones up right now at 5th and Broadway. Barriers will be set at certain intersections throughout the day and throughout the week. They're also restricting traffic from Market Street south to Broadway and from 2nd to Roy Wilkins. If your car is parked there right now, LMPD wants you to move it as soon as possible. They are also limiting parking in downtown garages. We also saw those boards going up around federal offices throughout downtown last night, including the Missouri Federal Building next door. The federal courthouse already closed this week, but feds say they will be on site protecting a number of these buildings.
We believe it seems to be an overreaction, but maybe they have information that we don't have. And I think everyone is preparing for the worst, and I think emotionally we should try to prepare for that, but I'm optimistic about justice.
Last night, the president of the Business Association sent an email to the downtown businesses urging them to get ready, recommending the employees begin working remotely. We'll hear from them in our next half hour. And again, LMPD says it does not know when an announcement will come from the Attorney General's office. Daniel Cameron's team telling us it also has no timetable, but the rest of us will be ready on a moment's notice to bring you that news when it happens. Kristen.
We also have New developments tonight in the investigation into Breonna Taylor's death. ABC News has confirmed that a total of 6 officers are now facing an internal investigation. Spokesperson Lamont Washington of LMPD tells ABC that the Professional Standards Unit is investigating whether Sergeant John Mattingly, Miles Cosgrove, or Joshua Janes broke any LMPD policy. Mattingly and Cosgrove fired their guns the night of March 13th, and Janes is the detective who requested the no-knock warrant. Now, the PSU is also investigating 3 additional detectives, Tony James, Michael Campbell, and Michael Nobles. These photographs provided to WHAS 11 show the 3 officers the night of the shooting. Any disciplinary action could range from written reprimand up to termination.
After hearing the evidence from our team of prosecutors, the grand jury voted to return an indictment against Detective Hankison for 3 counts of wanton endangerment for wantonly placing the 3 individuals in apartment 3 in danger of serious physical injury or death. The charge of wanton endangerment in the first degree is a Class D felony, and if found guilty, the accused can serve up to 5 years for each count. Kentucky law states that a person is guilty of wanton endangerment in the first degree when, under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life, he wantonly engages in conduct which creates a substantial danger of death or serious physical injury to another person. My office is prepared to prove these charges at trial. However, it's important to note that he is presumed innocent until proven guilty. During the last 6 months, we've all heard mention of possible charges that could be brought in this case. It's important to understand that all of the charges that have been mentioned have specific meanings and ramifications. Criminal homicide encompasses the taking of a life by another. While there are 6 possible homicide charges under Kentucky law, these charges are not applicable to the facts before us because our investigation showed, and the grand jury agreed, that Mattingly and Cosgrove were justified in the return of deadly fire after having been fired upon by Kenneth Walker.
Of the grand jury sitting in Jefferson County in the month of September. I also have with me today a representative of the Office of the Attorney General, our court administrator. For the information of the public and anyone observing who's not familiar with the process, once the report is received from the grand jury, if there are any indictments, I will ask the foreperson to randomly select a number. The case will then be assigned to the courtroom or division that corresponds with the number that has been selected by the foreperson, and the courtroom will, that case or those cases will then proceed in those courtrooms assigned for further proceedings. The indictment itself, that is to say the charging document in this case, will be transmitted to the Jefferson County Clerk's office. It will be recorded and made publicly available through that office. And so I will begin the report of the Jefferson County Grand Jury. In the matter of Commonwealth of Kentucky versus Brett Hankison, the Jefferson County Grand Jury charges as follows. Count 1, wanton endangerment in the first degree. On or about March 13th, 2020 in Jefferson County, Kentucky, the above named defendant, Brett Hankison, committed the offense of wanton endangerment in the first degree when, under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to human life, he wantonly shot a gun into the apartment occupied by initials CE. Count 2, wanton endangerment in the first degree. On or about March 13th, 2020 in Jefferson County, Kentucky, the above named defendant, Brett Hankison, committed the offense of wanton endangerment in the first degree when, under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to human life, he wantonly shot a gun into the apartment occupied by initials CN. Count 3, wanton endangerment in the first degree. On or about March 13th, 2020, in Jefferson County, Kentucky, the above-named defendant, Brett Hankison, committed the offense of wanton endangerment in the first degree when, under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to human life, he wantonly shot a gun into an apartment occupied by initials ZF against the peace and dignity of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Mr. Foreperson, is that the decision of the grand jury? Thank you. Sir, if you would please randomly select a number.
Megan, this goes back to the chief's firing letter.
Division 13. Thank you, sir. The case will then be assigned to Jefferson Circuit Court, Division 13. Madam Assistant Attorney General, do you have a motion with respect to bond?
Yes, Your Honor. The Assistant Attorney General asks for $15,000 full cash bond for the defendant, Brett Hankison.
I will grant the motion and assign bond in the amount of $15,000 full cash and issue a warrant. That concludes the business of the grand jury sitting for Jefferson County in September 2020. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You may be excused.
Community waits for that decision from the Kentucky Attorney General. One of the police officers involved is speaking out in an email to the Louisville Metro Police Department. Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly's attorney confirmed the 5-paragraph email obtained by WHAS 11 News was from John Mattingly. It criticizes city leadership and the FBI. Heather Fontaine's been going through it. She is live with more information and reaction. Heather?
Doug, one of the bigger takeaways from this email is when Mattingly brings up the night that Breonna Taylor was killed. In the email, he defends his actions and the actions of officers that were also there that night. Take a look at what he had to say. In that email, he writes, "Regardless of the outcome today or Wednesday, I know we did the legal, moral, and ethical thing that night." He goes on to tell fellow officers that they do not deserve to be in a position where they are cursed at or have bricks and urine thrown at them. Then expresses frustration with LMPD leadership and the FBI, saying they go after you for civil rights violations. Your civil rights mean nothing, but the criminal has total autonomy. The email did not sit well with Justice and Freedom Coalition leader Pastor Timothy Finley Jr. Here's part of his reaction.
To say that, it just shows why there's such a chasm between community and LMPD when it comes to trust.
We've heard all along people saying, I can't comment. So I think it's very interesting, and it makes me feel like someone has confirmed for him that he's in the all clear.
Sadiqa Reynolds, right there with the Louisville Urban League, says she isn't surprised by what is said in the email, but is disappointed. Mattingly's attorney also weighed in this morning, reminding us that Mattingly was shot and severely wounded the night that Breonna Taylor was killed, and that the surgeon is hopeful that this process moves quickly and his fellow officers and the people of Louisville remain safe. Now, we have reached out to the police FOP president about this email, and he says he's not commenting at this time. We'll have continuing coverage coming up tonight at 11. For now, reporting live, I'm Heather Fontaine for WHAS 11 News.
Now, today is National Voter Registration Day. JCPS celebrated and encouraged their eligible students to register to vote earlier this morning. JCPS Superintendent Dr. Marty Polio specifically said it is important for 18-year-olds to know they too can play an active role in our democracy. One senior already taken advantage of this privilege, hoping to inspire more of her peers.
To my generation, do not be silenced by the argument that you are just kids, that your opinion does not matter. That rebuttal might have worked 4 years ago, but you are 18 now. Do not be limited to the forced ideals from past generations. Form your own opinions and values. Continue to strive towards a better future for all people.
Elbel also says she chose to vote because it hasn't always been a universal right.
And we still don't have an official timeline from the Kentucky Attorney General on when we will get a charging decision in this case. At this time, we're still waiting for the outcome from the grand jury in this case. And even though we can't say for sure what will happen or when it will happen, we can learn more about the process. And we're going to bring in Rob for that part. Rob?
Hey, Kristen. So grand juries have actually been a thing since before the United States even existed. They are recognized in England as early as the year 1215. In America, the
Any heated conversations you've seen?
Doug, and I'll just stay right here for a minute so we can talk to you. The only interaction I've seen is from when the cruisers were following the marchers. I believe it was closer to Floyd Avenue, and there was a handful of marchers, I would say 5 or 6, that had stayed behind. They were yelling some explicit language at the officers who were sitting in their cars. Officers eventually got out of their cars, told them they're going to have to move. Harsh words were exchanged from marchers to police officers, but they did get out of the way, and that's when we saw officers really take off to try and catch up with the rest of the crowd.
Okay, Heather, thank you very much. Heather Fontaine following the protesters, the peaceful group at the moment. They are following down Bardstown Road toward Eastern Parkway. And as we expected here, once the city put that large barricade of check-ins and a perimeter around downtown, we believed that the protests would obviously leave the downtown area, and they have, as we have seen them along Kentucky Street at one point as well. Did want to read real quickly a section here of a lengthy statement just issued by Ben Crump, one of the attorneys, saying, today's news falls short of what constitutes justice. By no means does it define this moment or this moment in our history. The grand jury may have denied Breonna justice, but this decision cannot take away her legacy as a loving, vibrant young black woman who served on the front lines in the midst of a devastating pandemic. It's our hope that through the FBI's investigation, we will finally get the justice for Breonna that the grand jury refused her today. From attorney Ben Crump. And let's check in with Shay McAllister. She's following another group of protesters through the city right now. Shay?
Hey, Doug. Doug, can you hear me?
Yes.
Doug, we have seen a few windows be smashed. We're seeing tables be overturned here on Bardstown Road. We're seeing people start to hit windows and turn over tables and umbrellas. We're right near Longest on Bardstown Road, and this just started in the last 2 minutes. Up until now, we haven't seen any kind of attempts to damage anything. But now, do you look at Ramsey?
How y'all doing? Please don't record this.
Ramsey, someone just came out of Ramsey trying to ask them to leave the property alone. Trying to ask them to leave the property alone.
We ain't trying to get nobody.
But you can see, and some protesters also trying to keep them moving.
All right. So protesters
All right,
talking.
Doug, we're going to send it back to you.
Okay, Shay, thank you very much. Again, we have two reporters there along Bardstown Road. Shay was on the leading edge of the protesters, Heather Fontaine behind them. You saw some chairs being thrown around there. Shay was talking about some of the glass in the area. I didn't hear exactly what she said had happened there. Again, we're going to continue to follow the protesters as they have moved out of downtown. Downtown is still really quiet and vacant, as you can imagine. Let's go back to live pictures along Bardstown Road in the Highlands. Right after May 28th, the first protest that happened, that was a Thursday night in downtown Louisville. A small group of Black Lives Matter protesters were on the steps of the Hall of Justice. It was right after George Floyd's death as well. It was a joint rally. Also talking about Breonna Taylor that night, and then of course we remember the riots that happened the following nights in downtown Louisville. Since then, overall, there have been skirmishes between protesters and citizens. Also, cars have been surrounded, but overall, in general, they have been peaceful. They have been happening most every night, focusing in downtown Louisville. A small group of protesters were able to move around the city last night as well in downtown Louisville. We followed them. They stayed among the barricades and went down Jefferson Street and then up to Main Street and then back around down to Jefferson Square. Coming up here in just about 20 minutes, the Kentucky governor, along with Charles Booker of Louisville, who also joined some of those protests early on the first night he was there, and then he spoke to many of the protesters in the days afterwards. We'll also be hearing from J. Michael Brown. You may remember J. Michael Brown when the David McAtee investigation came out. He is the one who presented the results on that. Let's talk about some of the changes that are going to be made by the city and Louisville Metro Police Department. It's going to be very important. Remember, they were part of the $12 million settlement, so important to the family of Breonna Taylor. Here's Tyler Emery.
With protesters on the streets since May 28th, city and state leaders responded with their own demands for action. But
I'd go back
changed?
to the...
There was no LMPD body camera footage of the night Taylor was killed, which didn't violate any policy at the time. The detectives executing the search warrant on Taylor's apartment were undercover narcotics officers and weren't required to wear body cameras. In mid-May, Fisher announced all sworn officers must wear body cameras when executing any search warrants or in situations they identify themselves as police officers. Amid public pressure, then Chief Steve Conrad announced his retirement from LMPD, with Robert Schroeder set to take his place until the city hired a new chief.
If the officers don't feel in tune with their police chief, it displays itself on the street.
Then came calls for more reviews of the department.
Accountability, that's what we want to see.
We want police reform. We want you to quit policing our people, build relationships with our people.
It created a civilian review board work group with 33 Louisville leaders currently working on establishing a new board to oversee LMPD's actions and an office of the Inspector General.
That will, for the first time, have really meaningful, sustainable civilian oversight of police.
On May 28th, chants calling for change could be heard throughout downtown, leading the mayor to indefinitely suspend no-knock warrants the next day. At the start of June, the mayor announced an outside company would do a top-to-bottom review of LMPD. The city chose Chicago-based firm Hillard Heinz to review its use of force training, supervision within the department, and other systemic topics. Fisher said it's clear the city needs to reimagine what policing looks like.
We don't need any more studies. We don't need a review. We don't need another report. We need to do the work. And it's not we as in just the nonprofit community. It is everybody in this city.
Shortly after came another policy change. Interim Chief Schroeder said no officers can shoot tear gas without his or a designee's approval. 3 months from the day Taylor was killed, a law passed in her honor.
Congratulations, the ordinance passes.
And this is an opportunity, as her mother said, to save lives.
Metro Council unanimously voted to approve Breonna's law June 11th, immediately banning the use of no-knock search warrants in the city.
Don't be afraid to ask the people that you put in office to give you everything that you desire.
Chief Schroeder revealed a duty to intervene, with officers now expected to step in if they see fellow officers using excessive force or engaging in other misconduct.
We expect our officers to intervene either verbally, and they can say, hey, you need to cool down and try and resolve the situation. This just clarifies it in writing and lets the officers clearly understand what their expectation is.
Also, the city will ask Kentucky State Police to investigate officer-involved shootings independently rather than LMPD investigating themselves. Calls to defund the police rang through the city while Metro Council was finalizing the budget. It didn't take away any of the department's funds, but it did redirect what millions can be spent on. The new budget put millions towards disadvantaged neighborhoods, LMPD training, and the recruitment of a more diverse force. The Metro Public Safety Committee also introduced 2 proposals. One is an ordinance requiring officers to take drug and alcohol tests after officer-involved critical incidents. The other is a resolution aiming to increase transparency and expedite investigations involving LMPD officers. Metro Council voted to approve the resolution on transparent investigations August 6th.
Say her
Free Breonna Taylor!
Kentucky U.S. Senator Rand Paul also named federal legislation in Breonna's honor. In June, Paul unveiled the Justice for Breonna Taylor Act, which would ban no-knock search warrants nationwide. At the state level, senators in Frankfort also announced in July they'll create a bill to ban no-knock warrants. But protesters told us over the months these proposals, investigations, and policy revisions still aren't enough. Their push for change continues.
And we can go over the no-knock warrant issue here a little bit more because it was clarified by the Kentucky Attorney General, and he has just released a statement about his news conference today. And in writing, he says the officers were advised by superiors to knock and announce their presence in serving this specific search warrant. Evidence from the investigation shows that officers both knocked and announced their presence at the apartment. The officers' statements about their announcement are corroborated by one independent witness who was in proximity to Ms. Taylor's apartment. The officers indeed say in their recorded interviews that they changed the warrant from no knock to knock, and one of those interviews was done 2 weeks after the shooting. I neglected to point that out earlier, and I wanted to make that clearer here. Now let's check in with Shay McAllister again along Bardstown Road, and we have seen some chairs being thrown over. How are things right now, Shay, and where exactly are you?
Hey Doug, so we're on Bardstown Road right before Eastern Parkway. Over here, what's happening as we speak is a confrontation, a meet in the road between police and protesters. It's the first time that we've seen this in the more than 3 miles we have marched from downtown Louisville. Officers pulling up in their police cruisers, lining up in a line here on Bardstown Road and meeting up with protesters face to face. This just happened in the last 2 minutes. This comes, Doug, after we watched at least 2 different businesses have windows smashed in. On one business, patio furniture flipped over and thrown around. We also saw another business where a woman came out, an employee, saying, "We stand with you, please, not ours." And the protesters did keep moving. So now we're watching as it looks like there's conversations happening between police and protesters. Right here, right past Midland, and right before Eastern Parkway on Bardstown Road. They've never been clear about where they're marching today. Starting in Jefferson Square Park, heading down 6th Street, then Broadway, then taking East Kentucky for much of the way before we turned onto Oak, which became Grinstead and now Bardstown Road. It's a little over 3.5 miles, and they have been moving quick and moving with passion. We've seen a lot of emotions, a lot of people saying that this isn't fair, this isn't right. And now that they have this answer, they're going to stand up and make their voices heard, that they are not okay with this. They do not think this was the right choice. And it looks like there are conversations happening down here, Doug.
Shay, you have covered so many of these from the beginning, and we have gone for weeks and weeks now, waiting for this decision, waiting for it to come. Tell me what they are saying next. Are they still calling for justice for Breonna, or has their mission changed on what they want to see next?
Some of the different calls to action that we've heard of so far are one saying, okay, this is, oh, and Doug, you can see it looks like the confrontations are heating up a little bit there on the front line. Some pushing and pushing back between protesters and police. One of the big call to actions that we've heard of, though, is looking at top leaders in Louisville, elected officials. People saying, if this is the way this city is going to be run, then we need to go to the top and make a change. And it's that push to the polls that we've been hearing more and more. Doug, right when this march started, there was a U-Haul that had what people were calling shields. And that's what you're seeing, them pushing those shields into police. We're going to keep an eye on it, but for now, we'll send it back to you.
Okay, Shay, thank you very much. Again, the situation right there on Bardstown Road as they are heading toward Eastern Parkway. Reviewing again some of the Daniel Cameron news conference, I know that we do have some of the clips from his news conference. We're going to go to that as soon as we can here. And Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear is just a few minutes away from his live news briefing in Frankfort. We're going to bring that to you live here coming up in just a minute. But first, I want to go back to the 1:30 news conference with the Attorney General talking about the tragedy of this shooting.
This is a tragedy, and sometimes the criminal law is not adequate to respond to a tragedy. And I fully acknowledge that, and I know many that are watching today and those that are listening recognize that as well. But the response is that the grand jury was given all of the evidence, presented all of the information, and ultimately made the determination that Detective Hankison was the one to be indicted.
Indicted on wanton endangerment charges, 3 counts of wanton endangerment charges. His bond was placed at a $15,000 full cash bond, and they also issued a warrant for the fired Brett Hankison there. The wanton endangerment charges were involving the shots fired at people who lived in apartment number 3. And as you can see on our screen here, this is the story of the moment. Fired police officer Brett Hankison indicted Miles Cosgrove, who fired the fatal shot at Breonna Taylor, according to the Attorney General, cleared John Mattingly, who was shot by Kenneth Walker and injured, has also been cleared in this case. And he was, according to the Attorney General, the only one who made it inside the apartment that night. Miles Cosgrove was behind him in the doorway. You heard so many different reports about the number of bullets fired. Miles Cosgrove, we learned from the Attorney General, firing 16 shots. The interim police chief, saying that Brett Hankison blindly fired 10 rounds. Well, here's what the apartment looked like when the attorneys got in to take photos.
The clock on the wall inside Breonna Taylor's apartment has a bullet hole in it. Photos taken by the attorneys for Taylor's mother after the police raid show pots and pans in the kitchen were hit by gunfire. A hole in this yellow one, this blue pot, dented. The bullets pierced a box of Pop-Tarts in the kitchen, opening a package of them. And a box of oatmeal was also struck and opened too. The hail of gunfire shredded curtains. The walls of the apartment are marked by each hole. Here's 1B and 2B. The pictures show a chair was grazed by a bullet, and there's a clear hole seen through a plastic curtain shade. Gunfire peeled off parts of the drywall and broke away sections of the metal wall. Each bullet that struck a wall or item is measured for size. Detective John Mattingly said afterwards in a recorded interview that he fired a total of 6 rounds. Miles Cosgrove also fired shots from inside the apartment. Brett Hankison blindly fired 10 rounds from outside through the patio door, according to his termination letter from the chief. The attorneys say more than 20 shots were fired in the apartment, with bullets also hitting neighboring apartments, nearly missing a 5-year-old child and a pregnant mother. The photo evidence of a violent and deadly night.
And the termination now, 6 months after the shooting, from the Kentucky Attorney General, John Mattingly and Miles Cosgrove, justified with their use of force by Kentucky state law. Again, we're just a couple of minutes away from the Kentucky governor. He'll be joined by Louisville's Charles Booker, who has been calling for peace and calm in the city for the past few days, and also J. Michael Brown of the governor's cabinet. That's coming right up here at 4 o'clock as we're continuing our coverage here on WHAS 11 News. Stay here with us. I'll be back with you here at 4, and we'll have more on the protests underway now along Bardstown Road in the Highlands.
So much opportunity here, so much.
In the Hillcrest neighborhood say Halloween is going to look a little different this year. They just want to do their part to keep Louisville safe, and they're willing to go.
People with legal problems such as bankruptcy. I understand the financial difficulties my clients face. Bankruptcy isn't anyone's first choice.
We decided while we would examine materials gathered by LMPD's Public Integrity Unit, we would need to conduct our own independent investigation and start from scratch in the interest of thoroughness, fairness, and finding the truth. There was no video or body camera footage of the officers' attempted execution of a search warrant at Ms. Taylor's residence. Video footage begins at the point that area